Welcome, dwellers of the internet, to the first installment of Toku Legends, where I talk about the most iconic characters in tokusatsu, and what better place to start than with the PR legend himself, Tommy Oliver. To understand why Tommy is such a beloved character, you have to know what Power Rangers was like in its early days. The original MMPR team was a group of pretty simplistic characters that didn't get much development until much later on. Each team member had their one character trait, and that's about it. Which is totally fine, because what they lacked in individual strength they made up for in group interaction. And then, the new kid in town showed up. You see, the reason I think Tommy left such a strong impression was because he marked a lot of firsts for Power Rangers as a series. He was the first Extra Ranger, the first Evil Ranger, the first character to have an arc that lasted multiple episodes, he was the first in a small list of characters to have more than one Ranger color, and he remains the only Ranger to this day to have a total of 5 Ranger powers during his career, not counting the Megaforce team, of course. And yeah, having the badass dragon costume from Ranger and the Zord equivalent of Mechagodzilla definitely helps in the cool department. And finally, if you want to count Dragon from the IDW comics, then technically he's the only person to use 2 sets of Ranger powers at the same time. So yeah, the dude has a lot under his belt. But here in Toku Legends, we understand that it's the man that makes the suit, not the other way around. Like I mentioned earlier, Tommy was the first Ranger in the show to have served the forces of evil, having struck many critical blows to the Mighty Morphin team and caused major destruction to Angel Grove. Granted, he was being mind-controlled by Rita at the time, making him just as much a victim as anyone else, but that doesn't change the fact that a lot of damage was caused by his hand, and you can easily conclude that the reason he remained a Ranger for so long was so that he could redeem himself for his past actions. You know, upon reflection, it's crazy how much of Tommy's life must have changed ever since he moved to Angel Grove. As far as I'm aware, he was just a normal guy with a passion for karate, and the next thing you know, he's a color-clad superhero fighting an intergalactic war against evil monsters and corrupt space wizards, led by a giant floating head in a jar and his quirky robot. All things considered, he took the change pretty well. And looking back, that's probably what makes Tommy such a strong character, his ability to deal with change. Being a veteran Ranger also meant watching many of his friends and teammates leave for one reason or another, and having to learn to work with their replacements. All the different Zords and weapons he used over the years, and his transition to team leader, hell, even the evil space empire they fought seemed to change every other year or so. And yet, despite all of the turmoil and chaos, there Tommy was, fighting the good fight, and when the time finally came for him to pass the torch, he handled that pretty well too. By the time he'd stepped down during the events of Turbo, he had more than solidified his spot in the PR Hall of Fame. But as we'd see throughout the years, you can't keep a good Ranger down. His first reappearance in the show was in the anniversary special Forever Red, which is the greatest single episode of Power Rangers of all time, and if you disagree with me, you are wrong. Then a few years later, he would even go as far as to found his own team with the Dino Thunder Rangers, and even making a couple more appearances after that. Seriously, when it comes to PR, this guy has done it all. Which brings me to one of Tommy's most fascinating episodes, the Vision Quest. To make a long story short, Tommy was placed into a coma after trying to solve an issue with his black dino gem, the thing that allowed him to morph in that series. While unconscious, he enters a dream world where he has to battle against his previous Ranger incarnations one by one in order to wake up again. Not only is this sequence fan service incarnate, but it's also a great example of how to analyze Tommy's character, seeing how it's all a reflection of his subconscious. Granted, what I'm about to say, it's more or less fan bullshit, but well, I am a fan and I'm definitely full of shit, so here we go. First thing to note, the lack of the red turbo suit. Seeing how this was the power he passed on to TJ after he retired, he likely doesn't see that set of powers as his own. The seeming lack of the red turbo powers in his Mega Morpher supports this idea. Personally, I always felt the turbo powers in general were a better fit for TJ's group than the Zeo group, so it's never bothered me personally. Second, during all 3 battles, Tommy remains unmorphed. Obviously, this is part of the test to see if he still wants to fight, but it also means his opponents are all capable of overpowering him. That, combined with the fact he's not as young as he used to be, means he has to rely on his wits and experience in order to win. which, considering that he does defeat Zeo Red and Mighty Morphin White, shows just how much he's improved over the years despite his age. Granted, this is a dream sequence at the end of the day, so whether or not he could replicate this feat in the flesh is up to debate, but it's still a strong showing regardless. Finally, and probably the most interesting, there's the one suit he isn't able to beat, Mighty Morphin Green. The Green Ranger seems to be the obstacle that Tommy Oliver, and if we're being honest, his actor Jason Frank, cannot fully overcome. He is simultaneously Tommy's most iconic role and his most infamous, and while yes, he would go on to do a lot of good with those powers after he was freed from Rita's influence, he still represents Tommy at his lowest. But the most important thing to take away is that while he couldn't defeat the Green Ranger, he also doesn't surrender to him, even as he's seemingly about to die. Old Mean and Green may always be a part of Tommy, but he'll never let him define who he is. If the life of Tommy Oliver should teach you anything, it's this. It's not the suit that makes the man, it's the man that makes the suit. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, this is Stan. So this is kind of the afterword of the video. This is kind of me giving my thoughts around this video and why I decided to make it. So this is pretty much the end of the video. So if you're not interested in that, you can go ahead and click off. All the Tommy stuff is done. Um, so go ahead and do that. But if you're interested, well, thanks for sticking around anyways. So when I started getting into making videos about tokusatsu, I knew I'd figure um, just to change it up a bit, do something Power Rangers related. I was going to do that anyways because as much as I love Kamen Rider, I can only talk about it so much before I get sick of it. So I kind of need to get some variety going now and then to keep things fresh. And of course, obviously, I was going to talk about Tommy before the whole thing with Jason Frank. It's just that as soon as I heard the news that he died, I was like, okay, my first PR video should probably be about Tommy. But I wanted to give it a couple months first off because I didn't want people to think I was trying to bank off his death, which is a pretty messed up thing to do. I mean, it's not like I'm making money off these videos anyways, at least not at the moment because my channel's still so tiny. But even then, the thought's still there, and I didn't want to try and disrespect his passing by trying to capitalize on it because people do that. People do that a lot sometimes, depending on their profession, and that's just not what I want it to be. But the other thing that kind of kept me from getting this video done was whether or not it would be respectful to his memory. I mean, obviously, I love Power Rangers. I love talking about Tommy as much as anyone else. But someone who wasn't really a big fan of Tommy is, well, his actor, Jason David Frank. I don't think it's a secret that towards the end of his life, he kind of resented his fame for Power Rangers, or more specifically, resented that the only thing he was famous for was his role in Power Rangers and never really was able to move on to anything else. But then I figured, we don't really get to choose how people remember us after we're dead. Um, like, sure, we can try to shape our legacy through our actions while we're alive the best we can, but it sometimes doesn't always work out that way. Which is kind of a dark thing to think about, maybe, but I don't know. But the fact is, whether Jason Frank would have appreciated or not, I sure as hell appreciated the role he played in Power Rangers. So I decided just to go ahead and make it. And just to put it out there, I'm not the type of guy to follow celebrities or anything like that. I'm not a huge social media person to begin with. Um, but even I'm aware of how do I put this diplomatically? Jason Frank was far from a perfect human being. Um, I know he could be a pain to deal with on set on more than one occasion. I know he had this really, really petty thing with Austin St. John, and like there was this whole legal thing where like Austin and Frank couldn't appear in the um same show or whatever because it would like take the spotlight away from him or whatever. You know, he did like pretty petty shit like that. And again, the kind of the whole thing that he never really was able to get past the Power Ranger thing. I mean, hell, I was talking to my brother about this back when this was fairly new. Isn't I guess like the actress who played Kimberly, the first Pink Ranger, isn't she like some kind of executive producer for some kind of TV company or whatever? So yeah, definitely like, and obviously there are guys like Johnny Young Bosch, who's a prolific voice actor and does a bunch of stuff like that. In fact, I'm pretty sure most people know Young Bosch from all of his anime work, as opposed to his work as Adam in Power Rangers now, which is kind of funny for me to think about. But yeah, I know he tried a couple things after Power Rangers. Um, I know there was that one instance where he tried to get into MMA, and I think he got his ass handed to him. So yeah, not as tough as you think you were. But all this, and I don't mean to sound disrespectful. I really don't, but I know it's also important, at least to me, to when you remember a person, try to be as truthful as possible about it, because we're all flawed human beings at the end of the day. And it's also really easy to look at people with some rose tinted glasses after they pass, because that's just the way humans cope sometimes. Um, but I guess all of this is to say is that despite the flaws with Jason David Frank as a person, his work on Power Rangers obviously is a huge inspiration to me. Um, and for me at least, it's really cool to see this guy who was in the game since pretty much the beginning, continue to do all this PR stuff, like seeing him and like that fight versus Ryu was really cool. Um, when they got him to play Draken, for the promotional stuff for the IDW comics, that was really cool to me. I remember being pretty excited for that. Even if it was just him standing in the costume and reading some lines, it was still cool. It was still really interesting to see, and I guess my inner fanboy never really goes away. I mean, I guess the kind of the thing you realize when you grow older. There are some things you grow out of and some things you don't. And for me, Power Rangers was just one of those things I never truly grew out of. Uh, I've been rambling for a little bit now, and I guess to wrap this all up, I guess to say that, um, uh, rest in peace, Jason David Frank. You know, despite whatever your flaws as a person, at the very least, I appreciate your work. So yeah, so I guess that's I guess that's definitely kind of a downer note to end on, which, well, I guess that this is how those things go sometimes. So, yeah, I don't know how to wrap this up. Play the end card.
You gotta stand up when you're pushed down. Don't say the city no.